What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Win-A-Box Finals video, this time Win-A-Box number 17, and this Win-A-Box is actually a little special. So on November 1st, Konami announced several new skill erratas to some of the most used skills in the game, including Cocoon of Ultra Evolution, Inner Conflict, and Twisted Personality, as well as announcing several changes to how skills worked. All of these changes together effectively have created a new meta for the game leading up to the GX box release on February 25th. And as far as I know, Win-A-Box 17 is the first major or large scale tournament using these new changes. We had 64 players compete, and this is the largest one that I know of that'll be using these new changes. So I'm excited to see the decks and deck lists and strategies that people come up with for the early stages of this new meta and kind of seeing how everything plays out. So stay tuned for the deck breakdown. We'll go over the decks and some of the deck lists that people entered the tournament with. But first we have to get through this finals here. So Win-A-Box 17 took pretty much the whole month, which is typical. And then we had 64 players sign up, like I said, which gave us 7 rounds of Swiss, followed by a top 16 cut. And it all culminates with this finals right here. We've got Tetra down here in the bottom on Spellproof Armor, and then we've got Nikki up here at the top on XYZ Unions. This is Tetra's second appearance in a Win-A-Box Finals, and this is Nikki's third Win-A-Box Finals. However, both players are playing for their second Win-A-Box title. So I'm excited. Let's get into it with rock, paper, scissors here. Tetra immediately winning it with rock, and he will elect to go. He's actually going to think about it, I think. Here, both players wishing each other luck. And yep, Tetra thinking if he wants to go first or second. He will choose to go first. Now, I'm not sure if Tetra knows that Nikki's playing XYZ Unions coming into this match, but he probably chose first just to get his shockwaves down here so that they're live before Nikki can get down his scrambles. If I had to guess why Tetra picks first. Because again, first is not really ideal. There has to be a reason for you taking first. Second is the more ideal one to choose for just a general advantage of being able to see 5 cards. And so we see here, Nikki rips a hanger off the top. So we see hanger, scramble, and even a foolish here for Nikki. So Nikki's pretty much got everything that he wants. The offerings will unfortunately be dead, but he can use it as discard fodder. And then the Book of Moon may be dead, depending on how he uses it. If he uses it on his own monster, it is still live. But we see the hanger come down. That's going to grab the Y. And then Nikki can normal summon this Y and use the second effective hanger to attach a Z from the deck. So that is not a Z, that is an X. I think Nikki might have gotten ahead of himself there. I think that means he was thinking about Foolish Barreling an X and accidentally grabbed an X, forgetting that this is Union Hanger's Search. So, but yep, that foretells that he is going to be Foolish Barreling an X here, and so now Nikki has access to X, Y, Z using the skill. We'll see if he wants to make X, Y, Z or if he wants to leave the Z in the grave for another turn. Nope, he is going to use the accidentally put it on top. I don't know if it's maybe Nikki's a little nervous here, but he did make X, Y, Z here. And so probably gonna pitch this offerings if I had to guess, and that'll let him pop the shockwave and then set his scramble. So now Nikki has scramble active, and Tetra will not have shockwave to stop it. He also has the bigger monster here, but Tetra will not be taking any damage this turn due to using the skill. There we go. So XYZ over Ally of Justice. And now, oh no, Tetra does not have a monster. He's just going to set the shockwave, and that is going to give Nikki the opportunity to activate. He should activate Scramble here. He doesn't want to get Shockwave, and there is the Scramble, and Tetra's just going to scoop it. So game 1, Nikki comes out swinging, opens Hanger, Scramble, and Foolish Burial. Exactly what he wants to see. But as we mentioned, I feel like every time I see XYZ's play is XYZ's need to win that first game, because going into the sideboard for game 2 and game 3, there are a lot of really good side cards that you can side in to deal with XYZ Unions, including Lost Wind, Diffusion, Core Destroyer. And you can even see here Tetra taking a little bit of time during his side. Nikki's done siding, but Tetra taking a little bit of time because he's probably got a lot of stuff that he can put in. So there we go. Tetra gets to decide first or second here, and we'll see what he wants to do. First kind of bit him in the butt there. But he's going to take it again. It's just, there's no way it happens twice, right? I guess he's going to take first again. And pretty much same opening with the normal summon and then set a back row. And then Nikki has the same hand. He has Hanger, Foolish, Scramble a second time. And so Nikki can just do exactly what he did game 1 and win the game. Here comes the Hanger. Tetra probably should not have taken first. I mean, I guess it's a little unlucky having the Hanger, Scramble, Foolish 2 games in a row. That is a very fortunate opening hand. But Tetra did it to himself, taking first here. So down comes the Y. Hanger effect will attach the Z. And then he can Foolish an X here. And then banish for XYZ. He can pop the Shockwave, swing over the Colossus, and then set the Scramble and the Mind Crush. So I don't know if Nikki's lagging or if he's thinking. I might be getting ahead of myself. There is an L, so we can see everybody's hands, so obviously we can clearly determine, but Nikki may be afraid of this back row card. We know it's a Shockwave. Nikki may think that it is a Diffusion or a Lost Wind, but he really shouldn't be afraid of it because he has a Scramble, which can play through Diffusion. So he really shouldn't be afraid of it being a Diffusion or a Lost Wind. He should just go into XYZ. If it gets Diffusion or whatever, that's fine. Set the Scramble. There's not a second back row here, so you know Tetra doesn't have a Shockwave. He's free to Scramble and get back XYZ, and then go into XYZ the following turn and do it all over again. So he shouldn't be afraid of Lost Wind or Diffusion here. He did Foolish Burial the X, so he has access to XYZ. And oh no, he's afraid of he's afraid of this back row card, but he can play through it. He doesn't have to be afraid of it. And now Tetra top decks Offerings, which is effectively a Diffusion. It is a removal card, I guess. He's going to have a second Colossus here. And this monster is completely worthless to Nikki. He just left himself in a losing position here by leaving this Y up. I feel like Nikki really misplayed not going in XYZ here. And now he has to go into XYZ on the following turn. Now he's going to go into XYZ here. But Tetra's just going to immediately Offerings it and have the Shockwave to prevent the Scramble. So Nikki, huge misplay here in my opinion, game 2. He could have just done exactly what he did game 1 and won. He had the game. So here, now he goes into XYZ, but now Tetra has 2 back row. He has the removal and the Shockwave. He only had one or the other last turn. So now, and it immediately gets removed. Tetra will skip his draw phase. And now we'll have to see what Nikki wants to do. The XYZ is gone. If Tetra, or if Nikki scrambles, it will get Shockwaved. And I think that Nikki just threw the game by not, yep, there's the Scramble, there's the Shockwave, and that is going to be game 2. Because now the Mind Crush is locked up, and these cards, the Scramble can't be used, and the Hanger. I think he can Hanger, right? Unless I missed something and he already summoned this turn. I think he just banished and made XYZ, so he can Hanger here for a Y and a Z, for a Y. Yeah, a Y and a Z, but it's not going to stop any of this. This is just over. Nikki giving Tetra game 2. He let himself get psyched out. He let himself get psyched out by the... I'm going to go and turn down the volume here. This is kind of loud, to be honest. Kind of loud, to be honest. At like 15. But he let himself get psyched out by the back row. He was in a winning position. He didn't need to do anything different game 2 than what he did game 1. So, but there's a third game to play. So Tetra, or Nikki got to choose. He made Tetra go first here. So Tetra going first again, but we already see here Shockwave plus removal. Deadly combination plus monster. He's actually going to play a lure. A little risky because that could have pitched his only monster here. But I guess between the Summoner Arts and the Genzos and the other Colossus, maybe the math is in his favor there to do that. But a little risky. If he did not get a monster, he would have lost his only monster doing that allure. And he already had the Shockwave and the Diffusion. But so we see the removal, we see the Shockwave, and we saw Nikki open Foolish Burial, Union Hanger, and Scramble 2 games in a row. I feel like this 3rd game, he's due for a brick. He's just due to not see that, and you see it here. He sees the Scramble, he sees the Foolish, but he does not see the Hanger this time. He's going to go into XZ here, which is the only monster he can summon with this hand that is bigger than Colossus. So he's going to go into it, but Tetra has Diffusion, and he's probably just going to immediately Diffusion. Yep, there goes XZ. And now Nikki's on the back foot. He has to set his Scramble and his Mind Crush, but Tetra has Shockwave to stop the Scramble. And he just lost. So this is why this X and Z are effectively locked. They're banished, and they will stay banished. And so Nikki didn't get the all gas opening that he got game 1 and game 2, and Tetra actually got a really good opening. I don't know if it's a standard opening, depending on the ratios that he runs of diffusions and shockwaves, but he sees a shockwave and a removal card. Summoner's Art searching Colossalus. Nikki is actually going to Mind Crush it. And Tetra can shockwave here. Okay, so this is actually important. Tetra should not shockwave this. This is actually game deciding if Tetra shockwaves this. So if Tetra chains shockwave here, Nikki can chain Union Scramble, and that'll allow him to get out his monsters before shockwave resolves summoning the Jinzo. So Tetra, it feels bad, but Tetra just needs to let this Mind Crush resolve and save the Shockwave for the Scramble, because even though he loses the Colossus, he still has this first unanswerable Colossus right now for Nikki. And you just have to know that you have to know the XYZs can't answer this Colossus given this board state. There's nothing that they can make that's bigger. If they make any Purple Boy, the only Purple Boy bigger than Colossus is XZ. And he can't make XZ because X and Z are both banished. So, yeah, this is going to be 23 here. Now Nikki's in a situation where he cannot activate this Scramble. He's going to activate the... Oh my gosh. Nikki. He activates the Scramble, which is going to end this game right here. Scramble will be negated. Shockwave will summon Jinzo. It's in Tetra's battle phase, which means that Nikki will now take the 4,700 instead of just the 23 for the turn. And that is going to be game number 3. Actually, Nikki says can't discard. Oh, so it looks like Nikki didn't know. Or no, he didn't know because he doesn't know what card is in Tetra's hand to discard. So no, Nikki misplayed. Game 2, he threw game 2, and it looks like he's misplaying again here, unfortunately. He was already on the back foot, but he needed to just take the 23 and activate the Scramble on his turn, because then if the Shockwave comes down, he doesn't lose it. Like Jinzo comes down, but it's not Tetra's battle phase, and the game isn't over. Nikki does. Okay, so that was explained. Nikki gets it. That is going to be game number 3. Tetra takes it 2-1. What a fast finals. But Nikki, I feel a little bit bad for him there. He clearly threw game number 2, letting that one face down psych him out. And then game 3, he was already on the back foot, but he could have given himself 1 more turn, maybe 2 more turns, if Tetra doesn't see a monster to get over the Y, to potentially find, I don't know if he has any Cyclones, but Cyclones or some sort of back row removal to get that Shockwave off the field so that he could Scramble would have been needed. But that is going to do it. Tetra wins Win-A-Box number 17 with Spellproof Armor. And I gotta be honest, I would much rather Spellproof Armor win its first Win-A-Box here than XYZ's win another Win-A-Box. So Spellproof Armor, I remember people talking about this deck. I'll talk about it in the deck breakdown, but so Spellproof Armor finally wins after all of the other skills have been nerfed, ironically. But big congratulations to Tetra, and congratulations to Nikki as well. This is his 3rd finals appearance. I also know that he's got a couple top 4 placements, which we don't do videos on, but so congratulations to both players, but special congratulations for Tetra for winning his 2nd Win-A-Box title. Proud of you, buddy. Now let's get into the deck breakdown, and we'll talk about some of the decks and deck lists that people used during the tournament. Alright guys, and here we are with our deck breakdown for Win-A-Box 16. As I said, 64 players. Let's get started. Bottom to top here, you see this long list of one-of decks in every Win-A-Box. So here down at the bottom we've got TP Warriors, which Twisted Personality was one of the skills that was hit with the erratas. They errated the skill before it was both play. You would get a counter on the skill when both players took damage. Now you only get a counter when you take damage, when the controller of the skill takes damage. And so That's a pretty big nerf because it means that the burn strategy for Twisted Personality doesn't really work anymore. Like the burn cards don't work with Twisted Personality because burn cards do damage to your opponent. And you don't get counters when your opponent's life points go down. So you have to do damage to yourself, and realistically, how many times are you going to be taking damage in the duel before you lose the duel? So most self-burn cards, like Cyclone does like 1,000, and then you might take damage from like an opponent attacking you directly or something. So it's like, how many times can you actually get hit before you lose? Probably only like 2 to 4. So, and that third or fourth instance of damage is going to be you lose the duel from that damage, so it's not going to go back over to your turn where you can activate the skill. So realistically, you're only going to be able to resolve like Twisted Personality like once, maybe twice if you're incredibly lucky. Now with this skill errata, so I think that Twisted Personality as a skill is pretty much dead. And I see a lot of burn decks not even run it anymore. A lot of decks that ran Twisted Personality don't run it anymore. And I think the same is for TP Warriors, where I just think it's not really going to do anything. But maybe someone can figure something else out. But TP Warriors, I would just say stay away from it. But who knows? Maybe someone will figure something else out. Then we've got Stego Control, which is a deck we've seen before. We've got S&D, which is Serpent Knight Dragon. Also paired here with Relinquished. Neither really did anything, unfortunately. We've got Kairushin. We've got Pure Harpies. We've got Gaia, which honestly I don't think was a bad idea coming into it. The very first time that the community created a ban list for this format, because it was kind of getting stale, was Justice. I think it was Justice. It might be, I think, I never really know what's going on in the French community, but I know they do ban lists a lot. But Justice did a ban list with the JDG tournaments, the JDS, and this tournament hard banned Cocoon and Interconflict and XYZ Unions and things like that. Didn't errata the skills, just banned the decks, and Gaia was played a lot and did pretty well under that ban list. But of course you can see here under the erratas, XYZ Unions and Moth and stuff are still around. So it's not quite the same scenario that allowed Gaia to shine back during one of the previous ban lists. But it makes sense that some people would try Gaia here. Didn't really do anything though, unfortunately. We see Dark Necrofear, Dark Magician, Beast Warriors. So basically just a bunch of one-ofs. I wouldn't say that they're meme decks, but they're definitely like not even rogue decks I would consider. It's more of just fun decks. So I won't really show lists or talk about them too much. We're just going to move on to here, and you can start to see the purple or pinkish purple come in here, which is the top cut, so you can start seeing better decks come here. And we'll talk about these decks and go over their deck list. So we've got Fairies here, number 1. Let me go and pull up some lists here for them. But so we see Fairies right off the bat. 2 people play it. 1 did top with it, and you can see here kind of, so the fairy that they run is Moisture Creature. This is just the biggest fairy. It does have an effect. I think it's like tribute 3 monsters to summon it, and you destroy all your opponent's spell and trap cards. I don't really see you ever resolving that. It's more so of just it's 2,900 attack, 2,800 defense. So biggest fairy you can get. And then you have the Valhalla continuous spell card that lets you special summon a fairy. You're going to use that to mostly special summon Moisture Creature, but you can special summon Banisher with it. Breaker, just generic monster that you can summon. You see a lot of back row control, right? Like they have Cyclone, Night Beam, the Breaker counter. They also have Spell Shattering Arrow. So it's very much, it almost kind of reminds me of Dark Moth, where it's like you bring out Moisture Creature, swarm the board with your special summon off your continuous spell, with your Zoma, with your Moisture Creature, and then destroy all their back row and just kind of like beat them to death because your monsters are bigger than their monsters at that point. But it did top. Unfortunately, it didn't make it past the top 16. It was out immediately once it topped, but it did finish 6-1 in Swiss. So 6-2 overall in the tournament. Really solid showing from at least the one fairy deck there. Then we move on to Apprentice Moth. So this was kind of how I thought Moth was going to be played whenever I saw the changes, where the errata to the Cocoon skill pretty much killed Moth OTK, right? It made it to where if you use the skill to special summon the Moth from the deck, you cannot normal summon or special summon any other monsters that turn. So you can't double Moth anymore. You can't get out 2 Moth plus a Breaker anymore, anything like that. So the OTK version is dead, basically. For the most part, I mean, unless you get like a Zoma or something on your opponent's end phase and then make the Moth, I guess you can get out 2 monsters, but mostly Moth OTK is dead. And so I figured people would take this build path of more of a slower, stallier control moth. And you can see here it's just the moth package with both these decks. It's just the moth package with the apprentice package. One of them, actually, the top one here, actually reminds me a lot of Apprentice Monarchs, where it literally just looks like it's Apprentice Monarchs, but they took out the Monarchs. They actually left in one Jinzo, but they mostly took out the Monarchs and replaced them with the Moth package, and then it pretty much looks exactly like how Apprentice Monarchs was built. And then the other one, you see 30 card, pretty much stall variant, and you see some burn cards with Blast Sphere and Lava Gold. But both of these decks made it into the top 8, so definitely a really solid showing from Apprentice Moth. But you'll see up here, these Moth builds are much more aggressive, and I was kind of surprised to see 2 people show up with sort of a stallier control Moth, and 7 show up with the aggressive Moth, and do pretty well with it. But that's Apprentice Moth. Moving on, we've got Shadow Monarchs 0 for 3. So before these erratas, we had Inner Conflict Monarchs, which used the Inner Conflict skill, which was basically a change of heart skill. Right now, that skill was nerfed via the erratas. It's pretty much dead. I would say don't even touch it until we get synchros. But they replaced it with Shadow Reborn, the skill, which is basically Monster Reborn. So they replaced Change of Heart with Monster Reborn. Those 2 cards are not the same. Change of Heart is way stronger than Monster Reborn, which is why Change of Heart has been on the ban list forever, and Monster Reborn routinely comes off of it, and I think it's off of it right now. I don't really keep up with Advanced Format anymore. But Inner Conflict was a +1 and was also monster removal. Shadow Reborn is not a +1 if you tribute the monster that you bring back to summon a Monarch, and it's also not monster removal or any form of removal unless your opponent planned on using the monster that you reborned. They wanted that monster in the graveyard so they could use it, but then if you tribute it for your Monarch, you just put it back in the graveyard. So Shadow Reborn is not as good as Monster Reborn. Or sorry, Shadow Reborn is not as good as Inner Conflict, and Monster Reborn is not as good as Change of Heart. You're seeing it here, at least early on, with this 0-3 strikeout from Shadow Monarchs, where they just tried to replace Inner Conflict with Shadow Reborn. But I don't know, maybe someone will take this deck back to the drawing board and figure something else out. But early stages of this new format, Shadow Reborn and Shadow Monarchs are not a worthy successor to Inner Conflict and Icy Monarchs. But then we have Viral Despair here. I think this is Viral Despair's first top, to be honest. 1 for 4 usually just strikes out every single tournament. I think this is their first top, at least in a win-a-box. It was, unfortunately, they only made top 16 and then got eliminated, and to be honest, I wouldn't even really consider this that good of a placing, right? They just barely got into the top 16 and then immediately got eliminated. But taking a look at the deck list, it is just very standard Viral Despair. I think that nothing really changed too much from the erratas. I think it's more of just a lot of the top decks became less consistent or not as good, and that might be why you're seeing the 1 Despair top here. But we'll keep an eye on it and see what happens. I don't think Despair will ever be, I should rephrase that. If Despair is ever the best deck or a really, really good deck, it will only be for 1 tournament. Because once people see Despair, the Soul Releases go into the side, the DD Crows go into the side, and that's the nail in the coffin for that deck. So, Viral Despair will never, in my opinion, be a tier 0 or even tier 1 deck. And if it is, it will only be for like 1 tournament. But we'll see. Anything's up in the air. You know, I am not God. But moving on, we got Magnet Warriors. So Magnet Warriors actually had a pretty good showing. This is one of the best showings they've had in a while. 2 people topping out of the 4 that chose to play it. You can see the lists here, both running 2 Valkyrion. I'm only going to show one of the lists, but both ran double Valkyrion. And I'm kind of happy to see the Valkyrions coming back into the Magnet Warriors list, because there was a period there over the summer where people started taking the Valkyrion out of the deck because they were tired of it being like a brick. And I kind of mentioned that that's not a good move. If you take out Valkyrion, Magnets really only have 1 win condition, and that's the field spell. And if your deck only has 1 win condition and it's as basic as a field spell that can get popped, that's not good. So I definitely think that you need Valkyrion in your deck as a secondary win condition, or Magnets are just too easy to deal with, in my opinion. And the people who just don't like Valkyrion because it's a brick, these guys at the top are playing 2 Valkyrion. So not 1, 2. So I would say get over it being a brick. You can get through that, and you need that Valkyrion as a secondary win condition to boost the strength of the deck overall. But good showing for Magnets. Overall this tournament, I'd say usually they don't have it. Again, might be because of the nerfs to the top decks. We'll see where Magnets is on the next winner box, and the one after that before the GX box. But then we got GK Burn. So this is a blast from the past, a deck that came out around whenever the Twisted Nightmares and Match Millennium starter decks came out in 2020. And one person did manage to top with it. Not surprising that people kind of went back to it once a lot of the top decks, especially the decks that were kind of on top after the Battle City box came out. Not surprising that people, once they saw those decks nerf, try to go back to the decks that were at the top when the Match of the Millenniums, when the previous set, the Match of the Millennium and Twisted Nightmare sets came out. But we do have the GX, or we have the GK Burn. If you were around during that meta, summer of 2020-ish, you would know that you would see this list, and it's pretty much just very standard GK Burn, minus the Book of Moons. That obviously wasn't in the game until that winter of 2020 with the Battle City box. But standard list did top, unfortunately, again, out in the top 16, so not the best. And then I forgot to mention for the Magnets, yeah, both Magnet players were out in the top 16 as well. So pretty much all these decks were mostly out. The Apprentice Moth players made top 8. Both of them were out in the top 8, so solid showing from them, but the rest of these decks were out in the top 16, unfortunately, so right after topping, were eliminated. But then we go up here to Relinquish. Oh no! Shield your eyes, it's 0 for 5. Everybody else gets purple bars, and then Relinquish just 0 for 5. If you've been following previous Winnabox deck breakdowns, this is standard Relinquish. There's always a handful of people that want to play the deck, and the deck always strikes out. Kind of sad to see that even with a lot of the nerfs to the top decks, Relinquished still not able to top. But Relinquished itself did get nerfed as well. So a lot of Relinquished decks ran the Thousand Eyes spell skill, which allowed you to summon the Relinquish using the skill, which at the time protected the monster that you summoned from fast effects until you activated Relinquish's effect. Now with the ruling changes, the second that you summon the Relinquish via the Thousand Eyes skill, they can immediately Book of Moon it or Floodgate it or respond, offerings it, respond to it and not let you get off its suck effect. So Relinquish was indirectly nerfed with a lot of the changes, in the same way that XYZ Unions was nerfed. So to be fair to Relinquish, yes, it wins 0-5, but technically Relinquished also got nerfed pretty hard with the changes. So you're gonna have to wait. I don't know when it'll be good again. It was good all the way up until Scars of Battle format, and then it's just fallen off a cliff. Don't know if it'll ever be good again. Maybe the GX box will give it some toys to play with. But if you know anything about the history of Relinquished, being really good whenever the game first comes out and then never being good again falls in line with Relinquish's story arc and advanced format. So moving on, we do finally get to Moth. I will show you guys the I will show you guys the Relinquish list. The best performing Relinquish list was only one game away from topping, but didn't top. And then we'll move on to Moth here. So for Moth, I just call it Moth this time. Honestly, you could call all these lists Moth Beatdown. You could call them Moth Good Stuff. You could call them, I think Rook likes to call them, if they have Kaiku in the main deck, he likes to call them Kai Cocoon. But I'm done with the Moth names. I'm done giving Moth like 3 or 4 different categories, even though they're all pretty much the same thing. It's just Moth, the 5-card Moth staple, the 3 Paranoid, the 2 Moth, and then the other 15 cards in the deck are just generically good cards. I mean, I see Breaker, I see Kaiku, I see Book of Moon, I see Nidoria, I see Zoma, I see Floodgates, I see Nightmare Wheels, I still see like Cyclones and Night Beams, I see, what else do we got here? Just generically good cards with these lists. I see Nobleman of Crossouts, Old Vindictives, just generic cards. I see some Jinzos. It's just nothing about these lists really. It's just good stuff. It's just generically good cards paired with the Moth package. So I'm probably just going to call all these lists Moth from here on out. But you can call them, anytime I say Moth, it's aggressive Moth. It's a Moth good stuff, right? But they're just generic Moth cards. You just run the Moth package and then cards that you think pair nicely. I will make differentiations for Apprentice Moth, for example, and for like Stall Moth. But if you're just playing an aggressive Moth deck, from here on out, I'm probably just going to call you Moth. for the sake of keeping the deck list breakdown like as concise as possible. But it did have 7 people play, 4 people top, so Moth is still alive and well. Technically 6 tops with the Cocoon skill, but none of them made it past the top 8. So I would say, looking at their performances in Swiss, Moth had the best overall Swiss performance of all the decks, but it did not make it past the top 8. Next we go up to Spellproof Armor. So this is quite a big bar. Spellproof usually only gets 2 or 3 people to play it. This time 11 people played it, but only 1 top. Of course, we did see that 1 top win the entire event. Tetra was the only one to top with it. He won the event with it, which is pretty solid. That seems to happen a lot where only 1 person tops, but then they go on to win the event with that 1 top. So interesting. I'm kind of conflicted with this placement. On one hand, Spellproof Armor won the event. On the other hand, only 1 of 11 topped with the deck. So it's like, is Spellproof Armor actually good? Or is it... I think it's safe to say it's solid. But I'm going to wait for another winter box or 2 and more showdown results and stuff before I call the deck tier 1 or really good. Because this just 1 of 11 topping doesn't really inspire a whole lot of confidence. In me with the deck. I'd like more, a bigger sample size and more data before I weigh in on Spellproof Armor, but got its first top ever in the Win-A-Box and got its first win as well. So definitely, I'd like just that alone, great showing from Spellproof Armor, even if it's just 1 of 11. But 10 people are not very happy with their Win-A-Box, but 1 person is the happiest with how their Win-A-Box went. And I guess we did finally answer the question of how many Spellproof Armor people need to enter the tournament to get a top, and the answer was 11. So, but they did win. And then lastly, we've got XYZ Unions here, the most played deck of the event, tied for most tops of the event, and I will just say, of these 4 people, 3 of them were in the top 4, and the 4th one got eliminated in the top 16 by one of the other XYZ players that was in the top 4. So if Moth had the best overall Swiss showing, I would absolutely say that XYZ Unions had the best overall top cut performance. And factoring that in, probably was the best overall performing deck of the tournament. I mean, I guess unless you want to be like technical, because Apprentice Moth 2 for 2 in the top, I don't know, you want to feel like that. But XYZ Union's absolutely the best top cut deck. And then I'm going to show 2 of the best performing lists, or 2 of the top lists. It's unfortunately... the deck is pretty much not changed. The main deck is just maybe like 1 card has changed. Even the side, I'm looking at the sides for a lot of these decks, they have not changed. They changed like maybe 1 card. So even though the meta has shifted, it's, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And XYZ Unions, just the threats that they have to deal with and the stuff hasn't really changed at all. And so their side deck and main deck hasn't really changed at all. So not sure how to feel about the changes. I mean, to be fair, Konami did not directly attempt to nerf XYZ Unions. It was sort of an indirect approach. But you're just seeing XYZ Unions. This bar, these performances, these deck lists. I mean, the deck is pretty much operating exactly as well as it did before the erratas. So I would almost claim that XYZ Unions is not really affected at all by the November 1st changes. For better or worse, depends on how you feel about XYZ. But I would definitely say, just looking at this sample size of 1 tournament, XYZ Unions and Moth are the best decks of the format right now. The cat is still out of the bag on Spellproof Armor. But that's what I would take away from Win-A-Box 16. After looking through all the decks, I'd say XYZ and Moth are the best decks, at least for now, small sample size. And then cat's still out of the bag on Spellproof Armor. The changes overall didn't really, I mean, like Interconflict Monarchs are dead, TP Warriors are pretty much dead, but XYZ Unions and Moth are still full steam ahead, despite the changes. But we did see some cool things take Interconflict Monarchs and TP Warriors' place, like we saw Spellproof Armor here get their first top and first win. They did win the tournament. And we saw GK Burn return and get a top. If I were to spare, I think this is their first top. I'm just going to say it's their first top. Might be wrong. Might be their second top. If I were to spare gets a top. Fairies get a top. So overall, I say the changes were okay in terms of the healthiness of the meta. We saw 2 decks leave, some cool decks that were previously rogue or tier 3 take their place. But we'll see what happens with the next meta boxes as well, because this is, again, just the first tournament. So things are just getting started for this meta. But that is going to do it for winner box number 16. If you guys would like to get onto these tournaments, the largest ongoing speed duel tournaments around the Speed Duel League winner boxes, we host a new one starting on the 3rd day of every single month. They last the entire month. If you don't like monthly tournaments, it's okay. We also have a weekly tournament now, courtesy of the lovely Rooks Table, who hosts the Speed Duel League Showdown over on his channel, twitch.tv/rookstable, every single Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can join both of these tournaments by joining the Speed Duel League Discord. The link for that will be in the description below. So 2 tournaments, one's weekly, one's monthly. You can sign up for either one. There's also a lot of other information in the Speed Duel League Discord, so even if you're not interested in competing, you should still join the Speed Duel League Discord. That is going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the tournament, and I will see you guys in the next video.